Welcome, dynamic current viewers, to another episode of Insight, brought to you by Octet Solutions and Blissful Blessings Events. You're here with your host, Daniel Hayes, and
Andrew Blackmer.
And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Syria and meander off with our conversation into the Middle East and politics in that region in general. So, how are things going in Syria there, Andrew?
Looks like it's going pretty badly if you happen to live there.
Yeah. It doesn't look so great over there. A lot of people getting killed and stuff.
I think 1.4 million have been displaced.
1.4 million already?
Yeah. Since the start fighting in early spring 2011.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's a lot of people with broken lives now and probably missing loved ones and homes, that sort of thing.
So where are they going?
Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, which is ironic since Iraq, a lot of refugees from Iraq went into Syria during the Iraq War, the U.S. invasion in 2003.
Refugee exchange program?
Yeah, a little bit, just
right.
A little bit. But as you can imagine, a lot of those countries are worried because, you might not want to have 1.4 million new hungry mouths to feed if you're Turkey or Jordan.
Right. So, what's the stance these countries that are accepting refugees taking? I mean, are they providing resources to them? Is it a situation like Pakistan where Afghanis were sort of displaced and moved in there and were kind of unwanted and a lot of problems?
I think it's going to be a mix of the two. In some places you're probably being taken pretty well care of, and in some places you're going to be not so well off.
Right. Well, it doesn't look like too many of the Syrians seem to be very well off considering the conditions they're living in.
It's a civil war,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, you've got a lot of people who are in. There's a lot of concentration as far as the population, and with the shellings, they're doing that on apartment buildings. Just regular cities, and people are losing their homes, people are losing their lives and livelihood.
And in all of these things, what gets lost, I think, is that it's not always two sides or even three sides going at each other. There's a lot of people who don't want to participate in any fighting.
Right.
They don't want to take sides.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, they are forced to live with the consequences every day of, destruction and chaos and death. Most of the time, the people who die in these sorts of things are unarmed civilians.
Yeah.
Which is, why everybody seems to be very deeply concerned about it.
Yeah, it seemed like this began as a result of a couple of kids who were graffitiing anti-government material, and then they were taken by the government cronies, pretty much. I mean, like the military government sort of.
Yeah.
Without their parents being notified, rumors that they were tortured, and as a result of that, the city that these kids were taking from, which was generally supportive of the government, sort of changed their mind about that and began protesting.
The government there is run by Bashar Assad. He's the president. He pretty much inherited that post from his father Hafiz.
Yeah.
They've ruled the country, that family, for about 50 years now. Under emergency rule, we need more power to keep peace and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's where, the two children or teenagers who are taken into custody, it's under those sort of emergency powers that you don't need a trial and those sorts of things that, which concerns people.
But they've been under this military law since about 1963.
Right.
Them talking about they're at war with Israel. I mean, constant war. Yeah. So you just have a state of martial law all the time.
It sort of reminds you of North Korea, right? I mean,
Yeah, and it's pretty clear, although his title is president, it's essentially dictator. I mean, like you said, this family's been running for like 50 years. So I think, a lot of people here in America probably understand that this is not a situation where people went to the polls and elected Obama. I mean, this is kind of like...
When you go to the polls in Syria, there's one name on the ballot. You better pick it.
Yeah, it makes me think of The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen. Sort of like Similar situation.
Definitely.
None of these despots in the area just taking advantage of the country and its resources at the detriment of its own people. So that's really what the deal is, right? I mean, you've got this dictator who is being opposed by his own citizens and refuses to give up power, and in response to protests, he begins sending the military out to, kill people.
Yeah, the hope being, obviously, that if you scare people into submission, that they won't go out in the streets because they'll be scared for their own lives.
But this has been going on for a while now. I mean, just like you said, early 2011, I mean, at what point does this leader say, hey, you know what, these guys really don't like me, I'm never really going to have the type of control that I had previously, let me just go ahead and, stop murdering everybody and give up. Maybe he could leave the country. I'm sure he has tons of money from raping the country of its resources.
And connections.
Exactly. Yeah. Go live in France under a pseudo name in some big mansion with a bunch of,
bodyguards and cronies, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He could live it up. He doesn't have to be the ruler of Syria. What's the deal with that?
Well, I think a lot of these...
he could end up...
dictators, they don't think about necessarily their own comfort as much as they think about the position and power that they have. Comfort sort of being a byproduct of that. That, I am important and people look to me and people fear me. And if I go and retreat to France, I can have a great life and, access to all the comforts of the world, but I won't have people who will look at me in fear and respect or some combination therein, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it's clear that he's not going to have the same type of control. He's not going to have the same type of support that he has. He's ruined his country. Yeah. It's in, economic collapse. The major cities have been flattened. I mean, he's about this close to ending up with a stick in his tush like Gaddafi.
Right.
So...
you have to wonder what's going through his mind. I'd imagine he's trying to negotiate the best deal that he can, although...
I mean, he really had those options already, though.
Yeah.
I mean, America doesn't have a whole lot of sway in that country, but there are other members of the UN who could have offered him, a pretty good deal.
It's possible he just thinks he's going to win. He's just that full of confidence or bravado or machismo or whatever you want to call it, that he just thinks, I'm Bashar Assad, my family's ruled this country for half a century now, and we can't lose.
That's a lot of chutzpah right there.
Yeah, I would say so.
I don't know. I think Hosni Mubarak was the guy who, played his hand and then wised up. And if we look at some of these other revolutions, I mean, Egypt did their revolution pretty peacefully. I mean, if you look at the Egyptian military, they didn't start, striking people and, murdering their own folks. I mean, why is it that the Syrian military is so willing to just kill its own people and destroy its own country?
I wonder how much of that has to do with sort of the sectarian strife that is in Syria, because a lot of people in the government come from the Alawite sect, a Muslim sect, and a lot of them probably with some sense of justification feel that they might experience some reprisals if the government is to fall, which might make them more prone to extreme courses of action. You saw the similar ideas in Lebanon, where you had a lot of militia groups who were not looking to compromise because they feared for their own livelihood and safety should something go awry. And in Egypt, you didn't have that because almost all of Egypt is Sunni Muslim.
Right.
Almost all of them are Arab. There's not really this ethnic or religious strife that you see in a place like Syria. So you might have a little bit more of, we need to just manage this better rather than we're looking out for our own behinds.
Right. So, I mean, is it a situation where the military is striking, targeted areas of an opposing population? Because, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it almost sounds like they're just killing protesters and citizens indiscriminately. It's not necessarily, one party versus the other party, and the military is on one side of the fence and the protesters are on the other.
Well, in a place where you rule the government is ruled by the minority, right? It's sort of like
Right. Iraq was
yeah,
a similar situation,
right,
and they have
precisely.
ties to the Ba'athist Party.
That
as
if
well.
you open fire on on a crowd, it's likely that the majority of them are people who aren't related to you or like you in any way, right?
Right.
So that's why you can pretty much do that indiscriminately, because you have a pretty good chance of hitting people who are your enemies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes me think of Braveheart, where the king released the arrows after he sent his troops out already.
Right, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
when you've got that many enemies, you don't have to worry about friendly fire, right?
It tells me that this government is probably doing a lot of things wrong if the majority
Yes.
of its citizens are its enemies.
Yes, I would imagine that is the case.
Yeah, well, that provides a bit of insight, I mean, into the mind state of this, that you've got a minority government that's ruling this large area of land that essentially hates them. So, I mean, certainly they must have been under the thumb of this dictator for so long. Maybe he thinks they can put them right back under the thumb. But the problem is that the game has changed, okay, for a couple of reasons. One is, as a result of all of this violence, the country is in total disarray. Totally, okay?
Absolutely.
Even if it stopped right now, this country is in total economic collapse. It's done. And it's going to take decades to rebuild. And if you step back from that, another situation changer is the Arab Spring. You've got about a dozen countries in the area that have had successful revolutions.
Okay.
So why would they think that, Assad is going to be the great man who holds on to his country? What kind of ego is that?
It's the type of ego that led you to be in the place that you are in the first place.
I
Both
thought his daddy let him to
both
be in the
well,
place.
that's true too. But both he and his father got to the place they are. I mean, even when you inherit such a post, you still have a lot of people who think that they're better than you, think they can do the job that you have better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're nominally loyal to you, they are always looking for a way to take you over, take you down. I mean, that's how Saddam got power, right?
Yeah.
He, finangled his way in and said, "Hey, I know how to do the job better than the guy in front of me," and he took his place. And so, when you are Bashar Assad, or if you are Hafiz Assad before, you have to be a pretty ruthless person. And that is the kind of attitude that I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to double down on everything, even if it's a bad bet. That's how he got there in the first place, and it's, I think, a high likelihood that that's why he's reluctant to step away now. Whereas with Hosni Mubarak, I think it was no real illusions there that he was part of the military, and the military was the real power behind that. And it was the same with Anwar Sadat as well before Mubarak.
Right. Well, I just think it's really sad that he's willing to sacrifice his entire country, the lives and livelihood of all of his citizens to try to make a power play that I think to most people is pretty obviously going to fail.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back in a moment to discuss some of the attitudes that we've seen in the UN and potential intervention in Syria and some of the broader issues that are going down in the region. We'll be with you in a moment.